Hi, I'm Christopher Walker with Closely Observed English. In this video, I'm going to take you through what you can expect if you're a candidate for the Cambridge B2 First or First for Schools exam and you're preparing for the speaking paper. Okay, so the speaking paper lasts 14 minutes. You share that time with at least one other partner, sometimes with two, but then they make it a bit longer. And this is what the speaking exam room will look like. You come in holding your piece of paper called your mark sheet, and you take a seat next to your partner. So you're candidate A, they're candidate B. The interlocutor will say hello, the assessor will say hello, and then the interlocutor, the person asking you the question, will ask you for your name and your partner's name. Write it down on a piece of paper. They will take the mark sheets and they will pass them to the assessor. And then they will ask you a simple question like, where are you from? Now, this is not a real question, so don't give a long answer. Just say the name of the city or town that you come from, or even the country. Once they've done that, they will lead you into the start of the speaking paper. And the first part is what we call the icebreaker. So in the icebreaker, they will ask you some simple questions. Usually the way it works, because there's only 2 minutes for this part, they'll ask you a question, then your partner, maybe your partner again, and then you again. So you probably will get 2 questions. Now I'm showing some of the questions on the screen here. This is the sort of question the interlocutor might ask. They will have a kind of menu of questions on their script and they will choose something to ask you. To help you prepare, think about yourself the day before the exam. Think about recent things that you've done, parties that you've been to, holidays you've had, plans for the future, so that you're ready to talk about them. But if you feel nervous in the exam and you don't have an answer, it's better to make something up than to say nothing at all. For example, if the interlocutor asks you about sport and says, what sport would you like to try in the future? If you don't have an answer, say anything. You could say, oh, I'd really like to try football in the future. I've never played, but I like to watch Manchester United losing on TV. So playing football would be great fun. Something like that. So after those few questions, we move on to part 2, which is the individual long turn. Here in the individual long turn, the interlocutor places a booklet in front of you and it shows a couple of pictures. Your job is not to describe the pictures. Your job is to answer the question that the interlocutor reads to you and that is printed at the top of the page as well. You have 1 minute to talk. So think about possible answers as you're speaking. You don't have to give the right answer because there is no right answer. This is a test of your understanding of things like modals, or the expressions we use to show when something is possible. So when they say, why might people want to visit these places? You could say, people might want to visit this place because of the beautiful architecture. Or people could visit. Or people may be interested in visiting. Or it's possible that people want to visit, blah, blah, blah. Like that. Those are the kind of structures. After 1 minute, the interlocutor will ask a short follow-up question to your partner. This won't be printed, you have to listen. For example, which place would you prefer to visit? If you've been listening to your partner, you could connect your answer to what they said. You could say, as my partner said, this first picture shows some beautiful architecture and I really like that kind of thing. I would like to visit this place. If you weren't listening to what your partner said, that's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. So after your long turn and your partner's short response, you swap roles. It's now candidate B's long turn. They get 2 different pictures, a different question. They talk for a minute and then you respond. You have 30 seconds to talk about your response to the question that the interlocutor gives you. So part 1, part 2, you don't talk to your partner. Part 3, that changes. Here's an example. So the interlocutor changes the page in the booklet, shows you something like this, and they say, here are some things that people think about when they're learning a new language. You get about 10 seconds to look at the options, and then you need to start talking with your partner. As you're talking, always remember the central question. Here the question is, what would be good and bad about these ways of learning a new language? So for example, lessons with a teacher. What would be good about this? Well, the teacher can give you feedback. They can correct your mistakes. So you could talk about that a bit. What would be bad? Well, you have to pay the teacher. It might get quite expensive after a while. So then you work through the options, just talking about each one separately. You don't need to compare them at this stage. Talk about them separately. And after 2 minutes, the interlocutor will say, thank you. And then they will read this question. It won't appear on the paper. Which of these ways do you think is the most effective way of learning a new language? So now you need to make a decision with your partner. If you don't decide together, that's okay. It's not important for you to have the same opinion. It's important to discuss and work towards a conclusion. But what happens if you decide together very quickly? What if you both say straight away, lessons with a teacher, that's the most effective way, definitely. It leaves you 55 seconds still to talk, so you've got a minute to decide. So what can you do? Well, now you can start to compare. You could say having lessons with a teacher is more effective than reading a dictionary because buying a grammar book is less effective than having lessons with a teacher because. And this way you can give kind of evidence or support for your decision. And that leads us then to part 4. Part 4 takes the topic of part 3 and turns it into an extended discussion. Again, you talk with your partner, but now for longer. This part lasts for about 4 minutes. The interlocutor will ask you and your partner questions, or together, using this kind of hand symbol. They will also try to get a balance. So if you did all the talking in part 3, they will perhaps ask more questions to your partner in part 4. So you'll have some questions like this. Do you think it is easy or difficult to learn a new language? Do you think it's possible to learn a new language when you get older? You can talk about these with your partner. You don't have to get through all the questions. Just keep talking. Be natural. Imagine that you're at a nice cafe, relaxing over a lovely cappuccino, and you're talking to your friend about learning languages for some reason. Actually, if you were talking to a friend, you would probably use personal examples, wouldn't you? If they say, do you think it's possible to learn a new language when you get older? Maybe you would say, my mum tried to learn a new language and she found it very difficult for some reason. Do that in the exam. Personalize. By personalizing your answer, you'll find it easier to talk, so that's good. But you'll also use better language because personal answers require better language to be specific to your situation. If you talk generally about people, you need general language. If you talk about one person you know, you need the specific language for that situation. So there will be some questions, depending on how quickly you answer them. You might not get all 5 questions, for example, doesn't matter. And then finally, at the end of the 14 minutes, the moment you've been waiting for, thank you. That is the end of the test. And you can relax, say thank you, and leave. And then you have to wait a few months to get the results. Ouch, painful. So that's the shape of the speaking paper. That's what you can expect. In a future video, I'm going to be talking about assessment for the speaking paper. I'm going to talk about the things that you can do to improve your score. If you'd like to know when that video is made available, click the little notification bell icon when you subscribe to the channel. And until next time, thank you very much and goodbye.